Let's start looking at Higuchi's crackdown by looking at the position he's in before he sits the opponent to their butt. So we're going to see some common things. The first that we're going to take a look at is that he is always looking to get his inside hand down toward the guy's sock or ankle. This is going to do a couple things. The first thing it's going to do is keep the opponent's foot from moving back out to the side. So in order for the guy to get put into a crackdown, you want their foot inside their hip. If it's outside their hip, it's going to be more of a just straight drive-through finish. If his foot's inside his hip, it's going to be crackdown, or at least some kind of direction change first. So here we see his foot inside his hip, and again, Higuchi's hand snaking down the leg is going to keep it. He can either push or just block his foot toward the inside of his opponent's hip the whole time. The other thing we're going to see is his shoulder basically in the opponent's hip pocket, like right inside where their hip bone's at. This is going to allow him to create pressure in while he pushes the foot out, and it'll get the opponent to fall straight to their butt. So here we see him keep his shoulder in place as he hits the mat. Now once he hits the mat, hand being down the leg, the inside hand allows him to start getting the foot off, start getting the foot off the mat right away. So those are a couple things you're going to see almost every time he attacks. So hand down the leg, and as he cracks him down, there's like it's a little bit of a twist motion where his shoulder is driving this direction and his hand is almost wrapping and snaking that direction. It creates like a twist kind of torque to put the opponent down to their hip. And then again, hand being below the leg allows him to start elevating that foot up right away, which we'll talk about in a second. Now let's talk about his main goal when he's trying to finish his crackdown. And really it's not that much different than if you think about finishing on your feet, where you want to shift their weight across their body. It's the same idea in this crackdown. So once he gets the guy to his butt, again here we're going to see he's got inside hand high right now, but as the guy starts to fall, he's going to snake the hand down to the leg, and we see him post on the outside to try and keep weight off his head and to help shift weight back across the opponent's body. So again, hands low, foot goes outside his hip. We see him continue to keep good shoulder pressure to keep the guy pinned down on his hip. Now, opponent's in decent position here. He's got his outside hip higher than his inside hip. Higuchi wants to do the opposite. So he's trying to get the opponent's outside hip lower than his inside hip. So as we continue through, he's going to do that by lifting their inside foot up, which in freestyle it's a threat because it starts to rock the guy backwards. And we're going to see him post his hand so that he doesn't give up any exposure points. And then most guys try and scoot away from Higuchi, trying to keep that hip up. But as he continues to drive across and keep that foot elevated, we're going to see the weight's going to start to transfer back across the opponent's body, putting him on both butt cheeks and then on his far one. Now his outside hip is lower than his inside hip. And it's finished. And I've been calling this one just his basic outside shelf because he's outside the opponent's legs. Just crowd finish because he's crowding the opponent's body with his hips as he comes through, keeping foot elevated, and again shifting that weight across the opponent's body. All right, this is just a simple variation on his crowd finish. Again, we'll take a look at these position pieces real quick. Shoulder and hip pocket, hand snaking down below knee. Once he gets him to his butt, foot on the outside, starts to, again, elevate his foot off the mat right away, trying to get weight to the opposite side and even back over their shoulder a little bit to threaten some exposure. Now, this makes the opponent post their hand very often. And all he's got to do, reach up, attack their wrist, take their post away, and now he can look to elevate foot and get exposure over their back. Fairly simple, just a little variation on his crowd finish. This one's simple as well. Same kind of concepts. He's just going to change off to a double leg when he feels some space to get his hand through. Let's pause right here real quick though and look at his position one more time. Again, shoulder and hip as he continues toward his high crotch. This hand is going to snake down the leg. And here we can see kind of this twisting motion where shoulder kind of pushes through hip and hand is kind of wrapping around to get that weight shift to sit them on their butt. And again, hand low so he can look to elevate right away. Alright. Again, lands outside foot. Now we're going to see opponent look to kind of go chest wrap here. Alright. Foot's off the mat, makes it harder for opponent to move. We can see opponent's trying to drive back in and put weight toward Higuchi's far side or on his head. Higuchi feels a little bit of space, so he's going to be able to take his hand up and over for a double leg finish. But the thing he has to continue to do is shift weight across the opponent's body, and we can see that his opponent is trying to put weight up and over his head since he's got no post besides his head over there. So continues to crowd. We see weight go to his head, but as he does that, he's going to cast his hips over to the opposite side for some exposure points, and again putting outside hip lower than head side hip for his finish. Alright, here let's take a look at where the defensive guy is actually successful in using a chest wrap to get him back out of his crackdown. He doesn't get any exposure or anything, but he defends Higuchi's crackdown position pretty well. Let's stop right here real quick though. It's important to mention his head stays tight to the opponent's body the whole time. A lot of people, I think, at least some of the athletes that I've worked with, they make the mistake of, as they crack down, they swing their head out to the side, and there leaves a big space right there where opponent can start to move and beat your shoulder and get around the corner and things like that. So here he's not using his head to swing his opponent down to the mat. Again, it's shoulder pressure and then like this hand twist to get his opponent down toward the mat. Again, foot's outside. Here we see the opponent doing a really good job of keeping balanced and using his foot to try and shift Higuchi's weight to the outside. Higuchi's using his foot to try and shift weight across. Alright, so now, has his chest wrap. As we continue through, first thing we're going to notice is that he's able to keep his inside foot on the mat, giving him a little bit of drive. Most of his drive is coming off his outside foot. As he lifts, we can see all the weight is going to go to the far side, taking Higuchi up and over his head, and then right into a sprawl. So again, it's kind of a weight shift battle in here to see who can get whose weight across first. And here this guy just happens to get it across first with his chest wrap. So again, foot's in the mat, allows him to drive up and over Higuchi's head to win the weight shift battle. So in that last clip we saw where chest wrap can be effective to get your leg back into a reverse sprawl, to get Higuchi's weight shifted across. Here we're going to see a similar thing, except Higuchi's going to take advantage of the moment where there's a pressure loss from the opponent. So again, we see him get into his crackdown, right, about right where he wants to be. Foot's outside, hand low, trying to elevate. Now, opponent's got chest wrap, and we're gonna see there's gonna be a slight pressure loss as he goes to reverse sprawl. So we're going to see his leg start to come back. And as Higuchi feels this weight release, he's going to post his outside hand. You can't see yet, but it's on that far side. It's his hand right there. He's going to post his outside hand, keep his shoulder in, and start to lift his opponent up. Alright. Still great shoulder position, hand snake down the leg. That way he has good control. You come up and just whips this dude to his back. So one more time. Again, this is, if opponent does a really good job of keeping weight on your head and their hips in and their chest up, here we start to see a little bit of the weight release. The opponent is pushing up and in, and he's not keeping enough pressure over Higuchi's head to keep it down. So as Higuchi feels this, this is another important reason why instead of going chest curled, it should be a little more chest up to keep pressure with his hips into Higuchi. Higuchi recognizes it, starts to lift, comes up, and then whips him back down to the mat. Now, this last one Higuchi does is more of a last resort option when he finds himself in kind of a bad spot. So here he gets a little lower in the leg, which isn't really an issue until his shoulder gets outside his opponent's leg. Now it starts to become trouble because the opponent can get weight on his head, he can win the weight shift battle, or he can look to scoot around behind him. Alright. First thing we're going to see is Higuchi block, or attempt to block, his opponent's foot from stepping over his leg. Alright, so we see him block and block. His opponent eventually gets his foot over. Higuchi tries to start to shift his weight back, maybe to get his shoulder back in and attempt to get in a better spot in this crackdown. So here, with the opponent's foot stepped over, he can look to start attacking around the corner, especially with Higuchi's shoulder out. Makes it really hard to stop the opponent from getting around that side. Higuchi prevents it a little bit by keeping control of this foot and keeping it off the mat and outside his body on the far side. So opponent is looking for that crotch lock or something like that around the corner. Now, Higuchi's going to pull his arm out, which he does often on this finish. Arm comes out. Sometimes he posts it on the mat. Sometimes he wraps it around their back, like we're going to see here. All right, and he's going to threaten an exposure for the opponent. So here we see him start to hip into his opponent. And again, the goal is still to try and put weight to the far side. So as he's hipping in to the opponent, threatening this exposure, he's looking to step his far foot over top and get it to the other side of the opponent's body. So here we see him start to hip in. Of course, has to elevate this foot. Otherwise, none of this works. All right, so elevating this foot is really what's getting him to rock backwards. Opponent looks like he tries to roll through, or maybe Higuchi just pushed him to his back. But we see here, Higuchi's foot is going to start to get over their leg. And once he gets it to that opposite side, he's in a really good spot now with a Turk. I think this is an okay option for freestyle as a, I messed up, my shoulder's out, I have to try and do something. And you can threaten the exposure in freestyle, whereas in folk style, it is less ideal because you are allowed to expose your back to the mat for, in college, a certain amount of time, and in high school, until the ref gives control to the other guy. So there really isn't that much of a threat by putting your opponent's back to the mat. Again, unless you're in college and have to deal with the danger rule. But here in folk style, the opponent could still, even in this position, look to try and scoot around the corner without worrying about giving up any exposure. But he gives up the exposure and then has to bail back to his belly.